All right, welcome back to another episode of Guitar Fundamentals on StichMethod. Today we're going to be talking about a magical remedy that helps cure a lot of guitar ailments, and we'll get down to that in a couple seconds. Before we begin, just make sure you click that subscribe button with the bell icon so you don't miss any new videos coming out. And with that being said, let's get down to it. I teach a lot. I teach 5 days a week. I have tons of students. I love teaching each and every one of them. And this lesson here is a theme that I see in a lot of my students playing. It's not bad, I'm not, poo-pooing it, but we want to try and remedy the situation. And so I'm going to present to you some common ailments and how to cure them. All right, so if you feel like your chord changes are sticky, if you feel like you don't know how to control your tone, if you feel like your scale work is getting jumbled, if your bends are weak, the idea, and if there's more to it, let me see. Movement on the fretboard generally is just stifling. There's more to it, I'm sure, but all these ailments can be cured pretty much by paying attention to one thing. And that thing is your thumb. Your thumb of your fretting hand. We want to talk about this. Some facts about your thumb. Number one, it's dynamic. It moves around the fretboard. It doesn't stay in one place. You don't choose a place that's comfortable and stay. As you play, your thumb is going to move around the back of that neck, and it all depends on what you're playing, what you're doing. And so we're going to talk about, I guess we're going to start like the purpose of the thumb on the guitar neck. The purpose of the thumb is to supply some back pressure so that when you're playing, your fingers can push evenly against the fretboard. Now, it does not mean they have to be next to each other like this. They can be kind of below or above each other, but the idea is you want to supply back pressure at every moment so that your fingers are pushing nice and firmly on the guitar, whether you're playing a chord, whether you're playing scale work. The firmer the push, the better your general tone, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And also, it's there for support when you're playing chords and back pressure, and to give you 3 points of contact. We will give you all this information in a couple seconds. And so, the thumb, I can't stress enough, is not a thing that stays still. It's not, you're not playing, if you're playing classical guitar, I know a lot of classical guitarists can have their thumb kind of in one place and they kind of maneuver their hands, but if you're a fan of rock and roll and rock guitar, acoustic guitar, folk guitar, and non-classical type music, your thumb is going to be very, very dynamic and it's going to help you. Let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to have film some stuff from the back here. The first thing I'm going to do is play just a pentatonic scale. And I want you to see if you can see my thumb. Okay, here it goes. Ready? Pentatonic scale. Now you can't see my thumb. Where is it? I don't know. But I'm going to start on the thick string 5, 8, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7. Ooh, you see him? He's coming out. 5, 8, 5, 8. All right, you can see right there. And then as I play backwards, okay, he's being sent away. He's disappeared. All right, so you can see that this thumb moves up and down the guitar neck. Now the guitar neck is a curve, and there's the top half of the curve, 1/4 of the curve, and this is where your thumb tends to live. It usually can either end up here. Sometimes I know everyone's like, well, Hendrix hangs it over here. That's fine. Big thumbs, right? But as it comes down, it usually never passes the peak or the apex of the curve here. It kind of goes down here the furthest. And so this movement here is what we're looking for. And so if I play that scale again, you can see the idea is this thumb is trying to stay on opposite sides of the guitar neck. The lowest it can go usually is this curve here. So we start with the first finger here, and as we move, it starts to come up here, and now we have our first finger on the high E string and our thumb around the low E string. And this creates a good amount of squeeze. Now, I'm squeezing into the fretboard, but this thumb gets to push back at a very nice angle and create a good point of contact. You don't want to be playing like this. You don't want to be playing and dropping your wrist. It gets very hard to stay connected and your thumb is going to get caught on that curve on the way up. It wants to move within this little half of the curve, and this is where it works and moves. And so we got to learn how to kind of keep our thumb doing its job. So you can see right now in the scale work it moves. Let's get down to a chord. Let's get down to open chords. If I play a C chord here, you can see my thumb kind of naturally rests right like halfway in the curve, right about here. And this gives me a couple of things we want to talk about. This gives me a support system where I can push on this thumb and these fingers can push back. Now, my fingers are definitely pushing into my palm more. They're not pushing up into my thumb. This is a fact I want to get to you. You're not trying to push into your thumb. You're using your thumb to create a back pressure so you can push perpendicularly, there you go, into the fretboard. And another thing is happening. With my thumb being here, you can see my wrist is arced out. And it's so important when you're playing open chords that your wrist here, right here, it's not like this. You don't want to do this. You cannot play chords successfully with your wrist locked up against it. You got to drop your wrist, and in dropping your wrist, your thumb can hang on to the fretboard. Boom! And now your wrist is dropped, and you can play chords better, like C chords and F chords, G chords, A minor chords. You know, the mild or the more medium F chord with a dropped wrist. And so if you're playing with your wrist up here and you're trying to get your chords and you're stuck here like this, you can't do that. You got to use your thumb to hang on and let your wrist drop and wrap around. Okay, so that helps out with open chords. Another thing it helps out with, is 3 points of contact. If you look at this guitar or chord, and I'm playing a C chord, and you have to say, well, how many points of contact do I have on this? Well, my thumb is 1, all right, and my thumb is like really wrapped around it. And believe it or not, right here, where my first finger meets my hand, that's touching here. And then my third point of contact will be the chord. Now I can loosen it up a little, but what does this do? This gives you the most amount of tone that you get out of your guitar neck. Your guitar neck is made up of 2 woods, tonal woods, okay? And they want the sound to travel through them, back into the guitar, and out the guitar. And your job is to help that. Now, think about just being underwater. If you're underwater in a pool and you kind of like crack your knuckle, it's like crack, and it's because the molecules are so close together that the sound travels faster and louder and with more amplification, we'll say. But if you're in the air and you crack your knuckle, you hear just a light crack. The idea is you want to get a good amount of flesh and water and bone against your guitar neck, nothing that's hindering, okay? But your thumb is good, this point of contact here is good, and your chord. And what this does is it adds to your tone being bass and treble. And when you have more points of contact, you will start to limit the treble of the guitar and bring it more into a mid-range. And so that thumb is going to help you hang here, drop your wrist, and get your chord, your open chords better. Now, when I'm in open position, my thumb usually is somewhat on the upper end of this curve. Let's talk about playing on the thicker strings now. And I hope that you're enjoying this. I know I'm moving quickly, but you know, there's all different elements to talk about. Let's say you're playing on the thicker strings. Say you like Jack Johnson. All right, you didn't see my thumb at all. When I'm playing riffs on the thinner strings here, the thicker strings here, you'll notice that my thumb is dropped to pretty much the apex of the curve, if not the closest to it. And I'm pushing, not pushing like tremendously, but I'm giving back pressure so that when I play these strings here, these first 3 strings, they're pushing firmly against the fretboard, and I'm developing as much tone as possible. This also lets me have my third point of contact, right there, right there. You want to be touching this guitar neck and sliding on it, pretty much like, you know, let's see, train cars. You know, those are my wheels, and here's my train tracks. And so we have this. My thumb is against the back of that guitar. So if you watch me play now from behind Banana Pancakes by Jack Johnson, you can see my thumb is now on the apex of the curve, creating back pressure for the fingers on the first thick strings here. Now what happens when I get to the thinner strings? Well, your thumb is dynamic. It moves. It does not stay still. And so when I'm playing on the thinner strings, my thumb, you're going to see it start to pop up and curve around here. All right? And so for the Hendrix fans, he didn't have his hands here and get all the way down to he didn't have his thumb here and get all the way down to the thick E string. It moved. It moved, but he played comfortably. When you see his thumb here, you know he's kind of playing on the D, G, B, and E string mostly. That's what that means. And so as I come up to the thinner strings here, the D string, the G string, the B string, and the high E, my thumb and first finger are still kind of giving you these points of contact here, but my thumb has created the back pressure now that as I'm playing on the thinner strings, I can push on this fretboard, and believe it or not, now like the whole neck is kind of in this little curve of the hand, and that's giving me a good amount of tone. So your thumb needs to be moving depending on where you are. When you're playing open chords, it likes to be around the middle of the curve. Let the wrist drop. When you're playing scales or riffs on the thick strings, it wants to be lower. As it comes up to the thinner strings, it wants to be higher. If I were to play a song that's up on the higher strings here, you can see my thumb is already poking out here because I'm on the thinner strings. Let's see. Now, right there, I needed the bar chord, and what happened to my thumb? It disappeared. All right, with a bar chord, your thumb usually is going to be pushing right against the back of the guitar neck, and this is consistent for most bar chords. If I were to play each bar chord out of the Cage chord system, which will be linked up here, and we watch my thumb, here's my E shape, my A shape, my D shape. Let's see if I can play guitar. C shape, G shape. Okay, that thumb is right on the curve, right on the apex now, supplying the most amount of back pressure so that my first finger can really push firmly. Your thumb does a lot of work on the guitar, and it's got to learn that it's dynamic, it moves, it needs to supply the back pressure, it needs to get to a place where you can have 3 points of contact when you need it, and it needs to be able to do it, on the fly. And so practicing moving around the guitar neck, even just go from C chord here to a bar C chord here. If you watch it from behind, you can see my thumb is up on that guitar right here, and now it's barring to C, it's dropped, and you can see it moves as I need to come to the bar chord. If I'm playing a riff up here on the high E string, and then I want to come down to the thick strings, you'll see my thumb start to move. And so you want to develop practicing all over the guitar neck and being very, very conscious and deliberately keeping your thumb on the back of the fretboard between the top of the curve and the apex of the curve. There's a little section here, and moving around depending on the bar chords. You're here, thicker strings, you're down, thinner strings, you're up. Open, you're letting your wrist drop, and you're letting this kind of hang right about here. Everybody's thumb is different. Everyone's thumb is different. I have some people whose thumbs have been broken, and you have to make this your own. But the whole point of this entire lesson is that the thumb is not static. It is not static. It does not stay in one place. You need to create your own tone with your thumb. You can move better with chords and scales. And so this is what I just want to talk about, is how important your thumb is to moving. If you like this concept, and if you're wondering how do I practice this, you can join me on my Patreon Guitar Fundamentals tier or my practice session and bonus lessons tier, where I'll be coming up with between hopefully 3 and 6 practice exercises that we can learn how to get our thumb under control so it can give us the best tone, the best movement, the best chords, the best pressure, all that fun stuff. I'm going to stop here. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast, and hopefully I got the point home where your thumb needs to move. It is dynamic. It helps out so much. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you again on Tuesday with a regular In the Mind of or improv session for StichMethod. Thank you so much for being here. Share, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Now go move your thumb around.